Evidence comes right to the top of the list every time. You're dealing with some quite critically ill people in many cases, and why would your GP refer to this sort of service unless he believed it, unless there's some evidence? And actually, until fairly recently, earlier this year, go to the Department of Health website for this sort of information. I'm not going to clock through that. But this idea of health monitoring for people with, for example, congestive heart failures, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, complex diabetes, people who normally would have been spending a lot of time in unplanned hospital admissions with long recovery periods, and now spending a lot more of their time at home using this sort of model. Still fairly early days for the UK. There's probably less than 10,000 people using these systems UK. Worldwide, the number's a lot bigger. You're probably near 100,000. And therein lies some of the clue around the possible challenge and the role of innovation in this. Probably the biggest surprise when this evidence came out back in March was mortality rates. So the whole idea of this was really about efficiency. This is about maybe you can spend your time recovering from illness at home. And of course, that means that community matrons, doctors, physicians can connect with more people, and there's an obvious efficiency play there. But actually look at the top one. The biggest gain was mortality rates. People died less often just by being in the environment they wanted to be in. When you get to putting together the boxes and wires and the nerdy bit, and I'm not going to go through all these pictures, the reason these are here is to show that what you end up building, you're rewiring this model and you're building a new economy and new opportunities, the systems. So it's okay saying, I will send me home with a blood pressure monitor, but actually how did this come about? Someone is going to have to refer you to that service in the first place. And if you're dealing with 10,000 people rather than 2, then there's a service to be managed. You know, how do you source that equipment? How do you get consent of that many people? How do you schedule training, installations? There's a whole service industry to be managed and created. And actually that's servicing a number of different disciplines. So the whole idea of this model originally, by the way, was that actually maybe people with high needs in the social care world, they're receiving an awful lot of home care. A big burden on the UK economy. We don't even like to describe ourselves as being a burden, but that's the way the politicians portray us. And of course what people are looking for is to move between these disciplines, but maybe rather than having that high needs home care delivery, maybe you can move towards a supported technology environment, get a little bit of a thinner proposition, cheaper proposition, and so on. But of course someone also needs to monitor. There's no point just sticking that technology in there and hoping it works. So there's always a layer of monitoring service behind this, and it goes on and on. Health records that sustain from that. People are now involved in the industry, analysing the outcomes data, assessing people's needs and referring them to different disciplines. You can see the structure emerging here of a slightly different economy. And the heart of this is that actually people don't stay still either. We don't want people to stay still. We want people to be re-abled, improve and move on. Sometimes people move downhill and have to go into more intensive services, but you don't want to provide a service for life, particularly with something like home care. So a model has emerged there, and it's now taking root in volume. But there is a but. Let's talk a little bit first about stakeholders. And maybe this is where some of those opportunities arise. If you try to map the boxes and wires to people commissioning and delivering these sort of services, there's a simple model up there that maybe starts with a GP identifying a need. And think of this a little bit like you needing a blood test. Well, that GP might refer you to a blood test, or they might refer you to some telehealth monitoring. Let's leave you at home. Remember I talked about service management. If you're referring many people, someone's got to deliver that service in scale. Ultimately, you might end up with a bit of technology, someone's going to be monitoring that, and actually a multi-layered model of monitoring seems to work quite well. And that's all around the fact that if you've got quite seriously ill people, I come from North Yorkshire, they have such a system up there, and for the sort of people they're monitoring, or on the brink of hospitalisation, this sort of equipment will typically alert 15-20% of the time. So every day, quite a lot of alerts. But actually a lot of that is around things like Steve Sanders forgot to stand on the weighing scales today, or he's not taken his readings, or he's gone out for dinner with the family. Why wouldn't you? And actually what you end up with is this new service around filtering out the rubbish, the raw data, and get to something that's clinically meaningful. So actually what arrives on the community matron's desktop is probably only about 4 or 5% of the activity. And even then they filter that before it gets back to the physician or the other care provider. So you can see that layered economy that builds there. And my point here is that when you work way around that new model, new stakeholders, it creates opportunities for new products, new technologies, new services. I'm not going to go through these, but for each of those stakeholders, what's happened, if you play this to Northern Ireland, for example, they're trying to get to around 10,000 managed patients, and Tunstall's delivering that program over the next few years, next 3 or 4 years. There are pieces of software that scatter around this. There's intellectual property for people to create and contribute to this industry. It's a different industry. And I guess the big surprise for providers like Tunstall, who, let's be honest, come from the technology space, was find themselves needing to be creative in service industries. So the blobs in yellow there are activities that Tunstall, so this Tunstall Life Care is something that our company brands as a package that they deliver into, for example, primary care trusts, health authorities. We did not expect to be involved in the business of analysing risks of populations. We thought that would happen in the health economy departments of primary care trusts. We didn't do that. We didn't think we'd get involved in informed referrals and assessments of patients, but we have to do that because there's a vacuum there in many cases. There are opportunities for people to deliver new services or reporting data back. So it's changing the world that we're trying to deliver into.